Hey guys, Andy back here from Mediocre Hobbies, bringing you yet another painting tutorial. This one is a painting project that's near and dear to my heart. I've struggled with painting these guys for 15 years now. It's always a tedious process. If you look up tutorials online, you'll find a million different colors and they all say that they're the same thing, and that is of course the Imperial Fists Space Marine. That yellow armor is an absolute nightmare in my opinion. It has driven me demented. So I'm going to ask the age-old question of, can you contrast up Imperial Fist Space Marines? I have done a video here today. Hopefully I have solved it. I'm quite pleased with the result myself. I will absolutely be painting up a force using this technique, using these schemes. I would love to hear from you guys whether or not you think that this looks good enough to be considered an Imperial Fist Space Marine. Obviously it's subjective, but please let me know what you think in the comments below. Stick around to the end of the video to see the whole thing. And yeah, enjoy the video. Hey guys, I've begun this project a little bit differently. I had some cans of Averland Sunset spray, and I gave them a spray of this, and then I zenithal it with some bone. I don't really think that the yellow undercoat mattered at all. I think you could have started from a grey, zenithal with bone, and it would have been fine. So, moving on to the contrast. So the contrast, Iyandon Yellow, and we're going to apply this to all of the armor parts. I just want to talk a little bit about contrasting things like armor. Obviously, it's a little bit trickier than things like fur or skin or anything like that. So my feelings on it is you must overload your brush by quite a lot. You want to have a lot of contrast in the bristles of your brush. You don't want to be dragging any paint across any of the flat surfaces. That will cause those horrible streaks. So you basically want to have way more paint on than you need, and then pick a part of the armor and do that. So as you can see, I've started with the right leg. I'm going to get the contrast correct on the right leg first. So it's all on it. Now I'm going to look at it. I'm going to see where it's pooling, and then I'll pull away where there's too much contrast. So there was too much pooling on top of that little wreath thing. So I took it off, scraping the excess away in the base there. And you just have to be careful with that. I didn't think there was enough in the crevices there, so add a little bit more. And there we go. That's one leg with a nice solid coat of contrast over the top. As you can see, I saw there was too much on top there. Scrape it off. So you're going to repeat this process across all of the armor. And when you do it, this should be the result. As you can see, I've got nice, crisp contrast lines across everything. This is one coat of contrast on top of that primer that I did. I already think that looks fantastic. It's a lot smoother than I thought I was going to get it. I learned a lot from the Black Templar videos, so I'm using those techniques, things that I've learned from those videos, pulling it across here and seeing if I can do it with the yellow armor. Now we're on to Ushapti Bone dry brush. You may be thinking, what the hell are you doing? You're going to ruin all those smooth coats, but bear with me. It should all come together and become apparent in a moment. So light, very light dry brush of Ushapti Bone across the armor. As you can see, I'm doing directional. I'm just trying to catch any of those sharp lines on the armor. By sharp lines, I mean any of the bits in between armor sections and stuff like that. You're not trying to get the flat parts to be any bone. Okay, now the last stage that I'm doing for my personal Imperial Fist armor is I'm now going to glaze it with yellow glaze. So we have the Sigismund clear yellow. I basically replaced the old glaze paints. They're really good. And one solid coat of this over the top of all of the armor again. This will add a tiny touch of shine to it. Not as shiny as it's showing up here, it'll dry a lot madder than that. But it'll make it look like armor paneling. It'll also cover up any of those Ushapti Bone bits. The Ushapti Bone dry brushes will act like highlights, and now those highlights are going to get tinted like a bright yellow. And when it's all done, I think it really looks well. And this is the result. So this is where I'm personally leaving the yellow armor of my Imperial Fist Space Marine. I think this looks fantastic. I'm going to show you guys how to paint all the rest of the details in the miniature, but if you're comfortable with faces and cloaks and guns and swords, you could obviously leave it here. Use those techniques and then just paint up the rest yourself. For the rest of us mere mortals, we shall work through the rest of the miniature. So Fleshtearers Red is my contrast of choice for base coating all of the cloth. So his cape, his tabard, and actually his shoulder pad trim as well will be done with the Fleshtearers Red. I've chosen the Imperial Fists second company, which has red shoulder pads. It took me a while to decide between the black trim and the red trim, but I think red is more traditional, and I think it's a nice pop of color next to the yellow, so I went with that. You've heard me say it before in a couple of videos, so this is another one of those situations where you need to be careful applying the red. This color and any color after this will stain the bejeebus out of the yellow, so you need to be super careful and not hit the yellow armor with the red. Over here we have all of the red base coats on everything. Obviously it looks kind of scratchy at the minute, but obviously it's just a base coat. We'll be washing all of these different parts when all the base coats are on. So Gore-Grunta Fur, and that is the base coat we're going to use for the leather parts like the scabbard. And the webbing across his chest. Webbing, it's not really webbing, it's his, I'm sure that military thing has a name. Apologies for anyone who does know it and I don't. Denotes rank, the rope across his chest. And here's all the brown parts I've chosen. And now a quick coat of Fyreslayer Flesh contrast to put a base coat onto the face. Nothing special here, no tricks, just make sure it pulls in all of like his eye socket and his mouth. Nostrils, those kind of things. Sorry for accidentally holding the miniature out of the camera here. Okay, now it's time to base coat all the metallic bits. Going for Leadbelcher here. My go-to base paint for metallics. And all I need to do is pick out all of the silver details on the miniature, so the rest of the gun, the bits that I haven't painted red there, will go silver, blade of the sword, and a few more little trinkets around him. He's got a marksman honor, that's that little bolt round hanging off his waist there. Denotes him as a particularly good shot in the chapter. There's all the metallics, or sorry, all the silver metallics base coated. We're now going to move on to the gold metallics. Base coat Retributor Armour Gold for this. I just find each and every one of those beautiful ornamental details across the miniature and base coat them in gold. Now I'm quite pleased with how the yellow armour looks here. I'm still quite satisfied with that. I know the rest of the base coats look a little bit funky right now, but stick around to the end. It all does come together when they get layered up and are looking sweet. So there's the gold detail done. Bit of warp lightning. This is just for the laurel going around the shoulder pauldron detail. Obviously this isn't going to be on a lot of the Space Marines. A couple of the characters might have it. Some of them might have laurels around the sides of their helmets. So there are the gold bits and the green laurel bits painted in. Now it's time for Screamer Pink, and this is to base coat the wax part of the purity seals. Nothing special, this miniature has 2 purity seals. Just get the wax part of them painted in Screamer Pink. Now it's time for that chapter symbol, the Imperial Fist chapter symbol. So I've gone for White Scar's Air paint because it's quite thin. It will go over the yellow base coat because that's so bright quite easily. So you want to take your time, do 2, maybe 3 coats of this to get a pure white over the symbol. You don't have to be particularly neat here. There's basically a rim all the way around it, the circle that holds in the paint. So you can get the white coat done quite quickly. And it's when you move over to the black paint that you need to be super careful. So the fist symbol, the fist in the middle of the symbol needs to be black, and then the rim around the edge of the circle needs to also be black. There is no way of sugarcoating this. There's no quick shortcut. There's no nothing. There's just get the smallest brush you have, take your time, be careful. And now it's time to shade all of the details except for the yellow armor. You do not want the yellow armor shaded. So we're going for Reikland Fleshshade. This is a great one that goes over brown, gold, red. So it's going to look fantastic over everything. As you can see, I'm lathering on quite a thick coat of it onto those parts. And just like the contrast, I let that sit for a second, and then I will pull away the excess that I've pulled in places where I don't want it to be. Obviously I'm looking for quite a lot in the deep recesses of capes and stuff. Here we have it. Here's all of those parts shaded. I've also taken the time while the shade was drying, like I do in most videos, to base the miniature. It just frames it nice for the end result. So now we're going to move on to Mephiston Red Air. I use Mephiston Red Air a lot in place of standard Mephiston Red. It's actually quite a strong pigmented color, so it gives fantastic coverage even in the air version, even off the brush, and it's based like a pre-thinned paint. If you haven't used any of the air paints as simple brush paints before, I suggest you start with Mephiston Red, give it a try. You won't be disappointed. And all I'm looking for is a nice solid coat, highlighting the cape and the tabard and any of the other red details. I switch to a tiny brush and I go in and layer up the Aquila across his chest as well in red. I needed to take my time with that because that rope was in the way. It made it a little bit more difficult, but not impossible. Obviously his shoulders trim is also red. And as you can see, before we shaded it down and started layering, the colours did look a little funny altogether. But once it's been shaded down and starts to be layered up, it really starts to come together. Mournfang Brown to layer up the leather. I struggle a little bit with the colours to layer up the leather in this video. Mournfang wasn't my first choice, but when I started applying the other colour, I stopped and I deleted that footage and came in with Mournfang. If I could go back, I may choose a different colour for the scabbard leather. It's a bit too samey to the gold. Even just a black or something would have been nice. Would have broken up the centre of the miniature a little bit better. But live and learn, you guys can do that if you like. Get all the brown bits layered up. Onto Ushapti Bone. We are going to use this to do the parchment for all of the purity seals. So we're going to take our time. 2 thin coats, layer those up. I don't bother with the writing on the purity seals or anything like that. Like I said before, I'm not a competition painter. I'm not this guy into a painting competition. This is literally a forced commander. He's going to be put on a tabletop and pushed around and dice rolled in anger. So those extra little details can be saved for better painters than me. I'm also going to take the time to layer up the rope with the Ushapti Bone as well, which is really going to make it pop. As you can see here, that's the bone across that rope. I just basically went in with each strand and layered it up, and I think it turned out great. On to Leadbelcher. We're going to use this to kind of dot and scrape highlight the gold parts. There's no real rhyme or rhythm here. You could go in for a little dry brush if you want to, but I've been practicing with these just these little touches around, little spots of colour. It worked out great on my Black Templar miniatures, so I'm trying it across on this guy. Obviously with this Leadbelcher we're going to layer up the blade of the sword as well. and any other silver details around the miniature. Nice clean sword. And now it's time to layer up the face. Normally I don't put a huge amount of time into faces, just like a contrast, a wash, and one layer of layer paint, layered up once. And we're going to spend a little bit more time on this guy because he's going to be the captain of my force and people will be looking at him. So the first one is the Cadian Flesh. We're going to layer up most of his face, cheeks, nose, chin. We'll leave a little bit of the dark shadow, contrast and shade paint in the recesses. But just take your time. And then from here, we're actually going to do another layer, almost like an edge highlight. And we're going to use Kislev Flesh for this. And this is not an all over highlight. This is just for the sharpest details. So tips of nose, eyebrows, tips of chin, those kind of bits and pieces. You don't need to go crazy here. As you can see, I'm back to using my smallest brush. And there we have it. Okay, from here we are going to be layering up the Purity Seal wax. It's a really quick job, but it just makes it pop. So a tiny touch of pink horror. And just like with the silver over the gold, it's just a few dot highlights just around the edge of the wax seal. And then a little dot on top of the skull. Just adds that little extra detail. Gives the impression of a lot of effort. Really liking how this guy is turning out at this stage. Bit of Talassar Blue contrast, and that is just for the plasma coils of his pistol. Obviously, if you have a preferred plasma technique or a preferred plasma color, substitute the Talassar Blue for any other color you like, or your own technique if you have one you like doing better. I just quite like the paint Talassar Blue, and I think it looks really good for plasma coils. Because there's no other blue on the miniature, it really stands out. A nice focal point. And there we have it, guys. That was the last detail. I'm delighted with the result of this miniature. I finally have a scheme that I'm comfortable mass producing a force of Imperial Fists, and I will be doing that over the next couple of weeks. I'm going to be starting a crusade force with some friends of mine and hopefully building up a nice small army. I really hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope you found it useful. If you did, please think about subscribing to the channel. Drop this video a like, and if you have any questions about anything I did today, please feel free to drop them in the comments below and I will absolutely get back to you. Thanks a lot for sticking around to the end of the video, and yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Bye.